Tonight on the Worldview Report, a father dressed as a woman opens fire at a Rhode Island high school hockey game, killing family members, including his ex-wife and child, before taking his own life. In Canada, an 18-year-old man who identifies as female shoots and kills his mother, stepbrother, and a teacher, along with 5 students at a school. Yet police and media insist on calling him a woman. A Massachusetts whistleblower exposes massive SNAP EBT fraud. It's draining legitimate recipients' cards, with billions funneled into the state's migrant shelter system. A powerful new Sunni coalition led by Turkey is emerging in the Middle East, raising nuclear ambitions and encircling Israel diplomatically as Iran weakens. Turkey, they also dedicate a mosque in Gaza named after the ideological father of global jihad and mentor to Osama bin Laden. Then we turn to Qatar, which reportedly is planning the largest financial contribution to the Gaza reconstruction through the U.S.-led Peace Council. Their aim? Well, apparently to boost influence on behalf of Hamas. And then NASA scientists, they're warning about over 25,000 undetected near-Earth asteroids and how they could pose a major regional threat with no current capability to detect on a short notice. And finally tonight, in my Worldview Report commentary, a look at what could be history's biggest heist, how America's financial system may have quietly rewritten ownership of your investments, leaving everyday Americans dangerously exposed in the next big crash. All these stories and more as the Worldview Report begins right now.
This is Worldview Report with host Brandon House. Whether it is news from the nation's capital or your state capital, from the classroom to the boardroom, from national security to national and local news that impacts you and your family, Worldview Report is your trusted source for vital and uncensored news. And now, here is Brandon House.
Good evening and welcome to the Worldview Report. I'm Brandon House. An article from Zero Hedge is entitled, "Watch Latest Trans Horror. Dad in Dress Kills Ex-Wife, Child, Self at School Hockey Game." The article reports that on Monday in Rhode Island, a 56-year-old man reportedly wearing a dress shot 4 of his family members and a family friend. This all took place at a high school hockey game. Police say that Robert Dorgan, he killed the mother of his children and one of their kids before taking his own life. Video was captured in the arena as approximately 15 shots rang out in rapid sequence, with players and fans ducking for safety and then fleeing. A bystander intervened to disarm Dorgan, but Dorgan retrieved a second firearm and used it to kill himself. The police chief, Tina Goncalves, said that the bystander's actions, quote, probably led to a swift end of this tragic event, end quote. In early 2020, Dorgan told North Providence police he had undergone gender reassignment surgery and that his father-in-law wanted him out of the house because of it. Around the same time, then-wife Rhonda Dorgan, she filed for divorce, initially citing, quote, gender reassignment surgery, narcissistic plus personality disorder traits, end quote, before amending it to irreconcilable differences. A visibly shaken adult woman leaving the police department, she told reporters her father was the shooter and that he had shot her family and he was dead. She added, quote, he has mental health issues. He's sick. He's very sick, end quote. Watch this.
She described that shooting suspect as her father. She came out of the police department behind me here in tears after presumably being interviewed by police.
My father was a shooter.
What happened?
Shot my family. And he's dead now.
What was the reasoning? Was there a family argument?
He has mental health issues.
So yes, she goes on to describe those mental health issues a little bit more. She says that he had been struggling with mental health for quite some time. She said, quote, he was very sick.
An article from the New American is entitled Mentally Ill Man Shoots Up Canadian School. Mounties and media insist he's female. The article reports that on Tuesday in Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia, 18-year-old Jesse Strange killed 8 people and injured more than 25 others before turning the gun on himself. Strange, who began transitioning to female 6 years ago, first shot and killed his mother and his 11-year-old stepbrother at their home. And then he reportedly drove to Tumbler Ridge Secondary School, where he murdered 1 teacher and 5 students. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police, they issued an active shooter alert, describing the suspect as a, quote, female in a dress, end quote. After the shooting ended, the RCMP referred to the shooter as a gun person. And when identifying the suspect nearly 24 hours later, they named him, quote, Jesse Van Rootseller, end quote, while continuing to use female identifiers. An RCMP spokesperson said, quote, we identify the suspect as they chose to be identified in public and in social media, end quote. Major Canadian outlets, including CBC, Toronto Star, Vancouver Sun, and others, reported that the shooter was female and used the name Jesse Van Rootseller. Strange father and maternal uncle confirmed his legal last name is Strange, not Van Rootseller. His father stated that his son, quote, had a passport and the name on it is not Van Rootseller, end quote. Police confirmed a history of calls to the family residence involving mental health and firearms incidents. Strange had been apprehended and taken for mental health assessments multiple times, with his last police contact occurring last year. His gun license had expired in 2024, and he had no registered firearms. A witness told The Telegraph that Strange, he may have gone to the school intending to target the rest of his family. An article from Revolver News is entitled, If You Thought Minnesota Fraud Was Bad, Meet Massachusetts Snap Implosion. The article reports that a whistleblower who is a mid-level employee inside the Massachusetts Department of Transitional Assistance has alleged widespread fraud in the state's SNAP EBT system that has left legitimate recipients with empty EBT cards. The whistleblower told the Boston Herald that the fraud spike began around 2021 and tracked directly with the billions of dollars poured into the state's right-to-shelter migrant shelter system. Massachusetts, they spent $940 million in fiscal year 2025 and $894 million in fiscal year 2024. Nearly $2 billion total on housing and feeding illegal immigrants and shelter dwellers, as they call them. Recipients, they have reported arriving at stores on benefit deposit day, only to find that their cards were drained by multiple bogus purchases that were made seconds apart at fake vendors, often in other states such as Pennsylvania. The whistleblower said that caseworkers, they were ordered to, tread lightly during vetting of immigrants and to avoid demanding hard proof of address, identity, dependence, or expenses. Internal attempts to flag the patterns, they were met with pressure to push things down, so-called, and stay in one's lane. The whistleblower stated, quote, I think that everybody would be at a level of collective awe if they knew how much fraud is going on in the Massachusetts SNAP EBT program. It's just unbelievable how much money is going to waste, end quote. An article from the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs is entitled, The Middle East Emerging Sunni Coalition is a Strategic Threat to Israel. It reports that amid Iran's weakening, a new Sunni coalition centered on Turkey is forming. It's aiming for regional leadership and reassessing nuclear options to alter deterrence balances. Senior Israeli officials, they're expressing concern over Turkey rising in the region and their influence, and they're supported in their concern by the U.S. President Donald Trump. And, of course, that concern is their nuclear ambitions as Iran erodes. President Erdogan, he raised nuclear acquisition back in 2019, stating that Turkey cannot accept others having such weapons while it is denied, referencing, of course, Israel's possession. Turkey's foreign minister told CNN that Turkey is examining nuclear capability strategically, though it has no active program and remains in the non-proliferation treaty. Israeli security assessments, well, they indicate Erdogan is encircling Israel diplomatically by consolidating the Sunni world, turning former rivals like Egypt into partners to redirect momentum against Israel and replace the so-called Iranian firewall. And they're going to replace it with a Sunni diplomatic wall limiting Israel's maneuverability. A broad Sunni axis, including Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, Qatar, and Pakistan, is reorganizing to fill Iran's vacuum with military cooperation, thus to prevent Iranian re-enrichment in Syria, Lebanon, and the Red Sea. Israeli senior security officials, they're warning that coordinated action by Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey, well, it would force Israel to reassess military doctrine and freedom of action. And then an article from Israel Today is entitled, Turkey Opens Mosque in Gaza, named after the father of global jihad. The article reports that Turkey has inaugurated a mosque in Gaza City named after Abdullah Yusuf Azam. He's described as the ideological pioneer of al-Qaeda and the father of global jihad. The dedication was carried out by Turkey's Director of Religious Affairs, which reports directly to the president of Turkey that we just talked about. The mosque, well, it's part of a reconstruction project that includes two other newly built or restored mosques, and they were presented as humanitarian support for Gaza, with a focus on religious and social aspects. Azam, he played a key role in the 1980s, mobilizing Islamic fighters during the Afghanistan war. He reportedly mentored Osama bin Laden and co-founded movements that later gave rise to al-Qaeda. His teachings are framed with armed jihad as an individual duty for Muslims worldwide, and thus influencing global jihadist ideology. Israel's Minister for Diaspora Affairs reacted on X, stating, quote, "What a gesture from Turkey to finance a mosque in Gaza named after Abdullah Azam, the man who mentored Osama bin Laden and co-founded al-Qaeda. Erdogan's Turkey is a dangerous Trojan horse and actively promotes al-Qaeda-linked networks in Gaza and Syria. The continued blindness of the West to Erdogan's games is extremely dangerous. Wake up before it's too late," end quote. Turkey's Director of Religious Affairs manages mosques, deploys imams, and serves as a tool of Turkish foreign policy under President Erdogan, thus using mosques and their construction abroad to build networks, cultural ties, and influence. In Gaza, where religious and political narratives intersect, the naming, well, it carries symbolic and strategic significance. But to Israel, it's a clear red sign politically. An article from SRN News. It's entitled, Nigeria Says 100 U.S. Forces Arrive, Expanding Mission. And the report talks about 100 U.S. military personnel that have arrived in Nigeria as Washington, D.C. scales up an operation to target Islamic insurgents. A Nigerian Defense Headquarters spokesperson said that the troops, they would train and advise local forces, but not take part in combat. The deployment, it follows a formal request from Nigeria's government for military training. They also need technical support and intelligence sharing. The U.S., they carried out strikes targeting Islamic State-linked militants back in December. And a small U.S. military team has been operating on the ground to boost Nigeria's intelligence capabilities. In recent days, flight tracking data, it showed several planes carrying U.S. troops and equipment, we're told, heading to Nigeria's northern states. Earlier this month, Nigeria's military said it expected around 200 or more U.S. troops in total. The presidential spokesperson said that Nigeria needed, quote, massive support from the U.S. government, end quote, in terms of fighter jets and munitions, but declined to give numbers or a time frame. U.S. President Donald Trump has accused Nigeria of failing to protect Christians from the Islamic militants in the Northwest. Nigeria, they deny discriminating against any religion, stating that its security forces target armed groups that attack both Christians and Muslims. The country acknowledges, though, that they have serious security problems from these Islamic fighters, or should we say jihadists. But they deny that Christians face widespread systematic persecution. Nigeria's 240 million people are evenly split between Christians, mainly in the south, and Muslims, mainly in the north. We at Worldview Radio and Brandon House Live have reported numerous times on these Islamic jihadists in Nigeria that are killing and murdering men, women, and children. So, good news tonight. The U.S. troops are on their way, and let's pray they can save the lives of many, many Christians. We'll be right back after this break. What if millions around the world could access Bible teaching and worldview training for free right now without hitting a paywall? That's exactly what happens every day at worldviewtube.com because of the Worldview Weekend Foundation. We don't lock our live stream behind PayPal. We don't restrict our content to members only. Instead, the Worldview Weekend Foundation helps cover the cost of delivering free educational and ministry programming to people across the nation and around the world. And it's not just programming. My Sunday night church service, where I taught verse by verse through Revelation for 18 months, and now I am teaching through the book of Daniel, is made possible through the support of our church, Worldview Weekend Foundation. If you believe this kind of truth-centered biblical teaching must continue, donate today. Go now to worldviewfoundation.com. You'll also find our mailing address and phone number there if you'd rather give by phone or mail. That's worldviewfoundation.com. Thank you. Welcome back from the break. Thanks for being with us tonight and for remembering we are brought to you by you. WorldviewFoundation.com, WorldviewFoundation.com. We have now produced over 1,000 Worldview reports. And if you wanted to keep going, we need your support. I looked online the other day and I was really shocked at how little support had come in that one day earlier this week. I get a little discouraged, to be honest with you, sometimes, folks, because I know how many millions upon millions of dollars some of these groups bring in, and they're not doing anywhere near what we're doing at Worldview Tube. I'm not bragging here, folks, but look, we're running 7 days a week, and we are putting out programming that very few people are putting out. In fact, we get so many phone calls and letters and emails and texts telling us that your network is putting out information I would not hear anywhere else, and I don't hear anywhere else. Well, we appreciate that, but we need more people supporting us so we can keep going and growing and pay the bills. I know a lot of people are suffering right now, but if you can support us, will you do that? We got a nice email from someone, a longtime supporter. I recognize their name, and they said, I am sorry, we're going to have to discontinue our support. We have other financial strains, but we wanted you to know it's not personal. It's just we have other things we have to take care of financially. I totally get that. I understand. Here's the problem. We are losing some of our longtime donors, many of them who are senior citizens that are on a fixed income. So we need to replace them with new donors. Would you consider stepping forward right now and becoming a monthly contributor at worldviewfoundation.com? That's worldviewfoundation.com. You'll also find our mailing address there if you prefer to support us through the mail. Again, help us continue to push out free Christian worldview programming through your support at worldviewfoundation.com. Thank you. An article over at Israel World News is entitled, Netanyahu Rules Out Partial Hamas Disarmament. It says Iran must surrender uranium stockpile. The article reports that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, speaking at the annual summit of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, outlined what are very strict conditions for advancing the second phase of the Trump administration's Gaza plan. And if there's to be any potential nuclear deal with Iran, These things need to be met. Netanyahu, he rejected partial disarmament of Hamas, stating, quote, Hamas must first be disarmed, and then Gaza must be demilitarized. Disarmed means that it must give up its weapons, not main weapons, end quote. Specifying that even AK-47s, described as the primary damaging arms in Gaza, they must be surrendered. On Iran, Netanyahu expressed skepticism about any nuclear agreement, saying, quote, I expressed my skepticism of any deal with Iran because, frankly, Iran is reliable on one thing. They lie and they cheat, end quote. He insisted that any deal must require the removal of all enriched uranium from Iran and the dismantling of enrichment infrastructure and equipment, thus to eliminate any enrichment capability. There also must be the adherence to the Missile Technology Control Regime's 300-kilometer limit on ballistic missiles and the cessation of Iran's support for terrorist proxies, such as Hamas and Hezbollah. And then there must be strong verification measures to ensure compliance. Netanyahu, he noted that President Trump is determined to pursue a deal, but he emphasized that these conditions would benefit the security of Israel, the United States, the region, and the world. And he is holding a hard line on these requirements. In other news, there's an article from Israel National News entitled, Will Qatar Buy Gaza for Hamas? The report states that Qatar is reportedly planning to make the largest financial contribution to the reconstruction of Gaza, all as part of the U.S.-initiated Peace Council. This is supposedly to increase its influence in the region on behalf of Hamas. According to a Cannes News report, the Peace Council, which is established under U.S. President Donald Trump, will oversee funding for Gaza's reconstruction and a peacekeeping force, with each member country expected to contribute approximately $1 billion. Qatar, which already provides substantial fuel supplies to Gaza via Egypt, they aim to assert greater power through a major funding commitment, perhaps operating on the principle that he who holds the money holds the power, thus in an effort to sustain Hamas's governance. Hamas, they have conveyed to Arab countries, they have the intention to follow Hezbollah's model in Lebanon, retaining political control in Gaza while partially ceding some weapons. Israel has raised objections to the U.S., stating that Hamas should not participate in Gaza's management. Then we have an article from WION. It's entitled, 25,000 asteroids lurking near Earth pose major threat. NASA scientist says the fear keeps me up at night. The report lays out that two NASA-affiliated scientists are warning Earth faces a risk from over 25,000 undetected near-Earth asteroids, primarily those around 140 meters in size or larger. Kelly Fast is head of planetary defense at NASA and stated that while small rocks and very large ones are known, the mid-sized asteroids, well, they're capable of regional destruction and they remain hidden. She said, quote, it's estimated there are about 25,000 of those and we're only about 40% of the way through, end quote. She added that these objects can cause massive regional damage rather than global catastrophe. And quote, what keeps me up at night is the asteroids we don't know about, end quote. Dr. Nancy Chabot from Johns Hopkins University and former head of NASA's 2022 DART mission, she expressed similar concerns, noting, quote, we don't know where 50% of the 140-meter asteroids are, which is a concern. We would not have any way to go and actively deflect one right now, end quote. She highlighted a lack of investment and readiness, stating no DART-like mission is prepared for immediate deployment if a sudden threat emerges. NASA, they continue regular monitoring of known near-Earth objects, but the scientists, they emphasize that humans currently lack the capability to protect against an undetected city killer asteroid on short notice. That's what they kept referring to them as, city killers. During my 1 o'clock radio show today, I led my radio show with this article. It's fascinating because, as you know, I went through the book of Daniel in our Sunday night church service, verse by verse, took a year and a half. And we know that in the book of Daniel, asteroids come up several times. The opening of the sixth seal, we see asteroids. And so my question is simply this: is this another sign we are nearing, well, the stage being set for Bible prophecy to be fulfilled? I also took the listeners today over to the book of Job. You know, the book of Job talks about storehouses of snow, a storehouse of hail. It seems as though in heaven there is a storehouse of hail. And yet, if you study the book of Revelation, what do you find? Hail, asteroids, and hail. Well, if indeed God has a storehouse of hail, he's ready to go when he needs that to bring judgment during the tribulation. But these asteroids, 25,000, they're saying, and they're only 40% of the way through. So there's probably a lot more than that. It may indeed show us God already has his, well, asteroids ready to use during the 7-year tribulation that brings judgment from God on the earth. Fascinating. Well, now it's time for our nightly Worldview Report commentary. I just ordered a brand new book written by Justin Haskin and Jack McFerrin. The book is really about America's big heist, the next big crash. And it's really about, well, a heist in America's financial system. Not a traditional theft, if you will, related to cash, but a quiet legal rewriting of ownership that has left most everyday investors with far less security than they believe they have. The piece explains that when Americans buy stock, bonds, mutual funds, or hold assets in 401ks or IRAs or brokerage accounts, well, they assume they have direct ownership. However, nearly all U.S. securities are legally held by a single centralized entity known as the Depository Trust Company, or DTC. Investors, they receive only a so-called security entitlement, or maybe a weak contractual claim, rather than traditional titles. The system is created for efficiency in clearing and settlement via book entry records. But it places individual ownership, well, in a layered and indirect structure. The book warns that this arrangement becomes especially dangerous during a major financial crisis or market failure. In such events, assets, well, they could be frozen, they could be seized, or they could be used in what are called bail-ins. Those are mechanisms to cover losses at failing institutions. That's done with emergency powers that are, well, potentially prioritizing large counterparties over ordinary account holders. That means average Americans. The 2008 Lehman Brothers collapse, it's, well, cited as a precedent showing how legal priorities, well, they can take advantage of retail investors when the system finally unravels. Justin and Jack, they warn in their book that today's modern framework, well, it was shaped in part by influential figures, including a former CIA officer with reported ties to the Rockefeller family. And then, of course, USAID. You guys remember that group. And all of this is advanced through state legislatures with very minimal public notice. Concern? It's not predicting the exact timing of the next big crash, but it's understanding the consequences of the next big crash. When liquidity dries up and stress hits, the fine print in your IRA and all of the other securities you're holding, the fine print will determine who keeps what and who bears the losses. Folks, this is not conspiracy. It's cold, hard reality, and it's buried in the legal fine print of the system that many Americans have trusted with their entire retirement, their children's future, the inheritance to their children and grandchildren, and their entire life's work. The next crash. It's not just about, well, market drops. It's about who the law actually protects when the music stops. You may think your brokerage statement means you own those shares. Well, these experts are saying, along with others, think again. The warning is this: take time to know exactly what you really own and refuse to sleepwalk into a trap that may have been set up decades ago, back in the 70s. Wake up, get informed, and protect what God has entrusted to you, because the system, well, it's not going to protect it for you. What's the old saying? Let the buyer beware. That does it for this edition of the Worldview Report. As always, thank you for tuning in and supporting the broadcast at worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. Again, you'll find our mailing address there if you prefer to support us through the mail. Thank you for doing that, worldviewfoundation.com. Well, till next time, I'm Brandon House. Thanks for watching. May God save America. Take care.